From the great halls of their house, there are assembled three who hope to one day be the world's greatest driving heroes. Created from the cosmic legends of the universe comes our team captain, the Vision, Bill Fisher, and their soon-to-be Wonder Woman, Vicky Fisher, and our Captain Marvel and head flight trainee, Jennifer Scripchuk. Their mission: to fight injustice, share what is right and wrong, to get you out of your house and come out racing with them and serve all mankind. They are the Garage Heroes in Training Team.
Welcome to the Garage Heroes in Training podcast. We are going to have one tonight. We have two hosts and one guest besides me, and might want to strap in. Who else is hosting?
I'm Vicky.
You are.
And I'm Audra.
You are too. We have a guest, returning guest, now officially Street Mod Time Attack Champion 2023 for GridLife, a fellow podcaster with the IAG Thursday Thing, a unique podcast name. We have Dewey Dewitt. Welcome to the podcast again, Dewey.
What up?
How's it feel to be official finally? You were almost there, but not like by the you cannot be eliminated from championship, but now it's official.
Yeah, I don't feel any taller. So
no.
Yeah.
You weren't short to begin with, so you're fine.
No, I wasn't short, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I had a little cry. That was I did. I'd be
you put a little into it, you know?
Yeah, I mean that was many years of dedication, hard work, disappointment, money, time, effort, arguments, multiple jobs,
more crying,
a little bit, and crying for different reasons, a tumor, all sorts of stuff, and I finally managed to pull it off. So yeah, I shed a bit of a tear, but it was like the second it happened, and you know, we've made it official. We already started talking about next year. So
Yep.
All right, let's work some more. No really letting off the gas.
No, that doesn't seem to be your way. So that's good. And hopefully Arnold said it's not a tumor to you, so you should be fine.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to start with some fun stuff before we get into my stupidity of questions. We have listeners who wrote in.
Oh man, this is going to be good.
Okay. One of them was curious about the origination of the signed dollar tradition.
Oh man, that goes way back. That was actually a Marine Corps thing.
That could be why nobody knew what was going on. Okay,
yeah, that started with it was the best way to do bets, and you know, honestly, we were broke, but you sign $1, it's so much better than like $100 because you own it. You know what I mean? And yeah, the signed dollar bets were. I decided to bring that when Spaz and I were really in heated competition. That was a good time to bring that into the GridLife fold. But I've been doing that with other forms of racing and just random crap I was doing with my buddies for years. I mean, my tuner Graham still he'll pull it out every once in a while. He walks all over the country with it, and it's in his wallet right now. I guarantee it. Where he beat me in a foot race, and he's like one of the only people to have ever beat me in a foot race. And he pulls it out every once in a while. It's like, I still own you.
That's fun.
All right. I didn't know what they were talking about until I did my GridLife review, and I started looking at the early gears and gasoline, and I'm like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Okay.
Yeah. The dollar bets work really well. Signing $1 is, oh man, I'd rather give you $100. Mm-hmm. It's $1, but my signature's on it, and it's big sad.
All right. I'll take one more, and then we'll hand it off to the ladies for listener questions. What do you need to fix or upgrade for Boogie next year?
Well, Laguna was ugly. We had a little bit of a fire. What is the corner? I don't know the corner number past the corkscrew, but the big long left-hander. Yeah, the big long left. I was a little flustered because I was we were running into some ABS issues, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. And I'm also trying to find time like a moron when the car's not right. I should have just, we would have won it if I would have just parked the damn thing. But I may or may not have, we think it was a 2-3-2 shift. It was supposed to be fourth, but I hit second. And the
Ouch.
ECU said 12,000 RPM.
Ooh.
So it just, I tell you what, those IAG carbon synchros work. I just glid right into gear. It was just a quick little bang, but it was enough. And I pulled it right out of gear, made the next corner. And I'm like, all of this happened within a couple of seconds, but in my brain, it seems like it took a half an hour. So I went into like, is the car okay mode, and it seemed fine. The car was running fine at this point. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to finish this lap and I'm going to take it in because I was really close to the end of the lap. And I'm going through the start finish line. And normally when a Subaru engine goes, you tend to get a knock or some sort of warning. Something happens, just a little bit of a warning. Mm-hmm. Okay. Usually it's like, and then you'll get a like, and then it'll go. All right. If it's going to be a bad one, you'll get a before it like throws the rod through the top. This was boom, and it just nated the top of my engine. Oil shot out, hit my header, it caught the whole front of the car on fire, melted my wiring harness. It was ugly. It was all on the live cast. It took a little bit longer to get to me than I was expecting, and then I don't think they realized how serious it was. They just saw some smoke, and I'm like trying to like wave at them that it's on fire, and the guy's just kind of like wandering up to the car, and I'm like jumping around, and finally realizes it's on fire and starts dousing it down. I learned a lot about my fire suppression system and where nozzles need to be, and they weren't where they should be. So it didn't quite, I would have been fine. So if the fire would have went in the cabin, I would have been fine. We got a bunch of cleaning to do for that too. But the engine bay where we had it spraying in there, it was a little further away from the extremely hot stuff than we are comfortable with now. And we learned. So a lot of upgrades need to happen because we were already planning on making some upgrades, but now it got real. Obviously we need an engine. Thankfully I work for IAG, and I have some great sponsors, not only through IAG, but like Jay and Manley and that whole group are behind me. So I'll be able to put the engine together. That's the easy part. The wiring's gone. It was something we wanted to do anyway, but we're going to switch over to we're switching to an M-Tron for an ECU from the Haltech that we were on because we want to do some really trick stuff.
Mm-hmm. That was quite a couple episodes. You talked about that on your podcast if you want a lot of detail.
Yeah, if you want to understand the whole concept behind that and what we're doing, and this is no slight on Haltech. That company has been great to me for years. It's just the capability of what that was. We needed to go up to, let's call it a prosumer style ECU. Mm-hmm. And M-Tron was really excited about getting on board. Now we're also going to a power distribution module. So like a PDM, instead of using I was still on like a basic fuse box. I was still on drive-by cable. I wasn't even drive-by-wire at that point. So we're switching to drive-by-wire and a bunch of other stuff. We're going to be doing some really, really trick cold side boost control tactics and to keep the turbo spooled even when you're mid-throttle. We have some really neat stuff coming. But yeah, we broke a whole lot of things. The engine bay was ugly in it. But thankfully, like, most of the hard parts are fine. And, the car for the most part's okay. And like it was stuff that it was kind of planned to be replaced, but now we have to replace it. And there's never enough time. And the race car isn't priority until it's a priority. And, it's just how it works.
Yep. Plus it's not specifically local to you, if I remember right.
No, I live in Tennessee and the race car is currently at IAG in Maryland, but thankfully, let's call him my crew chief. It's the easiest way to explain it. Dylan's over there. Yeah, I mean, Dylan was the big X factor last year, what really got it done. Dylan and Ian, the two guys who were helping me out last year, were just absolutely massive. For the first time ever, I had somebody in the pits to kind of help me so I could concentrate on driving instead of only working on the car. And don't get me wrong, we had some long nights of wrenching and doing whatever we had to do, but I had somebody who was taking care of the basic stuff and, you know, taking a lot off of my plate, and it allowed me to think about actually putting down a lap time.
How did it feel to really only have driving responsibility in quotes? And did you feel weird about that?
It was awful, actually. Like, they kept yelling at me. It was funny because they wanted to win as much as I did, and they knew to win, I couldn't be working on the car. I needed to be thinking about driving. But I felt so weird because I'm sitting there like, what do I do with my hands? They're like, you need to go over video. You need to be looking at data. You need to be doing this other stuff. You know, get with Graham to see if we got to change some tune stuff. You know, do what you got to do, but we'll take care of the physical part of this car. Don't you worry about it. And there was even some times that there was some stuff going on with a car that they kind of hid from me because it needed to be hid. They kept it. They didn't want me thinking about those things, you know.
Mhm.
You know, we had some oil consumption issues and stuff, and they weren't 100% sure what it was. And you
So
know,
how much input do you have into all that? And do you want to have that input, or you want to be removed
at
from
the
it?
track, I don't. To be perfectly honest, at the track, other than maybe suspension stuff, and you know, hey, do you think we can turn it up or not? The less input I have on that, as far as like tire pressures and stuff like that, sure. But as far as like, unless it's a complete disaster and it's all hands on deck, it's better that they're monitoring things because it's off of my plate. And I realized that later on in the season, and it made us even better as a team. But early in the season, it was really, really tough. And it worked out. It was really strange because I'm not used to that. I'm used to being basically a 1 or 1.5 man show. And at least when it comes to the weekend itself, I've always had help with people, you know, coming and wrenching on the car with me and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, when we're not at the track, I do whatever I can to be a part of that. It's a little strange still that the car is half a country away from me, and a lot of work happens when I'm not there, but Dylan and I have kind of the same mindset on a lot of stuff, and it works out really well. Honestly, Dylan's got a better mindset than me on most things, so it's probably turned out better that I wasn't there in some cases. But if we run into something that we have a difference in opinion, we figure it out. You know, we just try to stay in communication. It's 2024, man. You got video on right in your hand. Can you imagine like explaining that to somebody even back in the day? Like, oh yeah, I'll just use my phone and I'll show you a video of what we just built. Like,
Yeah.
we have that ability these days. So,
So what about the rebuild? Like, how much input do you have into the rebuild?
I know exactly what we're building. I mean, we're doing another 2.3D stroker. To be perfectly honest, the guys in the engine department know significantly more than I do. I know what we're building and what the goals are, and basically that's been a developing process. We've got that pretty much down though. That engine was perfect till I killed it. So we just need a carbon copy of what that was. I don't want to mess with anything. That engine was so good. And we've got a great recipe there.
Oh, that's great. So is it fair to say that your focus is on any driver modifications that are needed for next season?
There's a lot of driver mod that happened in the off season. A lot of that was done on the sim. And that was one of the big things that I did the season before is I invested a little more into my off season development and myself because I knew there was time there. You know, I look at that time, my direct rival was Jackie Ding, and Jackie's incredible. And I'll watch some of his YouTube videos and how he's using his brakes and the difference between myself and him and where he's smooth and where I'm not. And I started realizing there was if our cars were probably 1% apart, you know, but there was a driver aspect to it that was probably a solid 2 or more percent apart as far as like total time. And I needed to close that gap. Do I think I have closed that gap entirely? Absolutely not, but I definitely shrunk it a bunch. Jackie's an insane talent. And but I knew there was work on my side that could have went a long way. There's another podcast I listened to that really started nailing stuff and bringing it home for me. It's called the Lizard Brain Podcast with Tom O'Gorman and DJ Ellis and Drini. If you haven't listened to that, I can't stress enough. If you are a driver, that is a driver-focused podcast. It's not about cars. It's about driving.
No,
and
they
it
don't-
is
They don't like
really
cars.
good. No, they're actually terrible with cars, but they're incredible drivers. Tom is a former IMSA TCR champion. So like the guy really knows his stuff. And both of them are driver coaches, and they really go into the mentality of, you know, competition and things like that. You know, it was really interesting to hear people who have kind of the same mindset. And sometimes you think you're an alien, and then you realize you're not. And it's really, I don't know, it for some reason was kind of empowering. But I heard how much DJ was spending on his sim. He's like, well, this off season, I'm going to spend, what do you say? I wanted to do 8 hours a week on the sim.
Mhm.
And I figured it out. I'm like, well, that's about 8 races or so. So I decided I was going to do that same thing. And I immediately saw improvement from that. So I try to do 10 races a week in iRacing, driving all sorts of various stuff. The new rain, oh, chef's kiss. So good for driving. And you learn so much so fast.
How well does that translate?
Extremely well if I came up through a sim. Okay, playing like Forza and stuff like that. Let's not call it a sim. I came up through Simcade stuff. It's certain things, muscle memory, things like that actually translate really well. Plus, I force myself to play in VR so I can see distance, and that helps a lot too. And it is astounding how accurate something like Mid-Ohio is. All the bumps are correct, the curbing feels correct. And I've been on Mid-Ohio in the rain, and it's the most terrifying place on the planet.
Yep.
And Mid-Ohio in the rain in iRacing is simulated basically perfectly. And I was astounded how good that was. And you will learn a ton. And especially if you don't know a track and it's in the simulator, or there's that helps a ton. But you also run into issues of there's only a limited amount of vehicles. So you can kind of work on your approach, but you can't build something specifically like my car's wacky, you know. But if you've got let's say like a Club TR car, if you could use the GR86 Cup car in the game, and it's going to be real close in time and what that car feels like, you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot really fast. A lot of what I've learned more than anything, the biggest thing I've taken away is braking and how I use the brakes. Not only how a lot of it was how I was releasing the brakes was definitely causing understeer and instability in the car. I'm getting a lot better at releasing a lot slower, a lot smoother, making that transition onto the gas a lot smoother. And now I'm starting to learn left foot braking, which I had a really good time this weekend when I was out at 100 Acre Woods, so out in the Ozarks, ripping around in my BRZ with street tires on it or summer tires on it, but playing around with left foot braking and playing around with the balance of that in a real car. And it really started to show how much I was learning from the sim. That was the first time I really got to play with left foot braking in an application quite like that.
If you want a really good discussion, a friend of ours podcast, Blind Apex podcast, they had Tom on. Yeah. And they had a really good discussion on braking today. It just came out the day we were recording.
Really?
So, yeah, it's really good.
Tom likes to say, because he hates when people use the term trail braking. It's just braking.
It's just good braking, I believe.
It's just good braking. Like, it's just using the brakes properly. And he's right. And because we'll be in the pits talking about, I drag the brakes on the way in. Like, that's normal. That's what you're supposed to do. And honestly, and this is nothing against a lot of coaches, and I kind of understand why this is, because I even went into time attack thinking, you got to brake in a straight line, then turn. And like, it's all a big analog, like spaghetti sauce. It's constantly changing. There's
For sure.
micro corrections made all the time. So learning that balance has been massive for me.
Mhm. So, listener request came in, and what are the best 5 Dewey hot takes are about racing?
5?
5. Give us 5.
5 hot takes.
Like things you think that others might disagree with, I guess was
Yeah.
like Sunday Cup is not time trials, whatever.
Well, I mean that's I was trying to go beyond that, but yeah, the whole concept of Spirit of Time Attack drives me nuts. There's no such thing as Spirit of Time Attack. At least in what a certain demographic thinks the Spirit of Time Attack is. I'm not going to mention another opposing group, but they seem to think Spirit of Time Attack is something different. You need, I guess a big one is you need horsepower to have fun. That's crap. That's total crap. Here's one that I don't think is probably going to go over real well, but it's the truth that everyone is friends in the paddock. When competition happens, I'm not saying there isn't a level of respect, but if you aren't going to like each other out in the real world, you may or may not like each other at the track. That's okay. You just have to respect that. Okay. If there are certain people you may or may not like, or you may actually find out you don't like them at the track. That's okay. You have to be respectful, but not everybody has the same mindset, and you run into different types of people, especially when competition's involved. At an HPD, it's a little different.
Sure.
But when competition gets involved, a lot of stuff changes. Even if you're fighting for plastic trophies.
If you can't do 5, I'm sure we'll hit 2 with our subject matter for the podcast. So it's up to you.
I mean, I'm gonna nail one right now that Subarus are not competitive or even more, or they're more unreliable than something else. Basically, the only right answer in all of at least Time Attack is a Corvette. If you're not driving a Corvette, you're doing it for some form of a passion. Okay, you love this car for some reason. It isn't the right answer because the right answer is a Corvette. It's a C6 Corvette for everything. It is. It is the only if you can fit that car in the class, it's the right answer. I hate it as much as everybody else, but it's the truth.
Just in case people aren't following what you mean about the C6, because I understand what you're saying. And
you want me to explain why the C6 Corvette is the greatest? I totally can. Okay,
a short one.
Okay, it's perfectly balanced. Aerodynamically, it's better than anything you're going to get. It's a completely simple shape. That LS engine just never breaks, or if it does, you can fix it for $15 at AutoZone. And it was built pretty much from the ground up like a race car. You've got double wishbone all the way around. It comes with decent brakes, and the aftermarket is there for you if you need anything. And you can go anywhere from the stock amount of horsepower, which puts you at, even in a base one, somewhere around 400 horsepower, to 2,000 if you need it. And there's a beaten path to get there. And it just, and it'll be reliable, quote unquote, at any level of competition, horsepower level, whatever. It is compared to whatever else bad idea you think you're going to build. You will not build a better mousetrap than a C6 Corvette.
Yeah. We did have one listener request for podcast reel on this one. We are requested to use the Oogie Boogie song.
Which one?
Voice play.
Our favorite Boogie song is actually Rob Zombie singing Boogeyman.
Okay.
He did a cover of Rubber Band, like the guy who did Rubber Band Man. Actually, no, I think it was Casey and the Sunshine Band. And then it was Boogeyman. And we would just hammer on that.
This is a little different style, but
okay.
It's okay. You'll see it on the reel if you're bored.
All right.
Last one, listener question.
So GLTC racing soon or in your future?
I hope so, honestly. So I'm going to go a little bit into my mindset with things, and what happens beyond here is what happens. But we have an opportunity. Hopefully, there's still a lot of moving parts to this. So this is not, we're aiming towards it. But we're not sure if it's going to happen. A lot has to go right. But the idea is to try to win the championship again this year, so we can be the 2 times, and just so we can run around saying we're the 2-time. And then next year, Mtron and Garrett and a couple other companies have expressed a lot of interest in trying to get us to World Time Attack. And to do that and be competitive in the class that we would have to run in, some changes are going to need to be made, and those changes are going to boot me out of Street Mod, which would break my soul because I love that class so much. But at that point, I have a feeling, and if everything goes right, I will have accomplished what I've needed to accomplish in that. And at a certain point, I need to try some new and interesting things. So we're going to gear the car towards that. And if we kind of follow how Ferris did it last year, we're going to have to throw the thing on a boat right after GridLife Midwest.
Right.
So GridLife Midwest would be kind of a shakedown for it, and it'd probably be in the track mod class for whatever comes out of the other side of that. So we take it over there, do that thing, and we probably wouldn't see it until sometime around now, the year after.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, that car is no longer legal, and I'm going to have well over half a year without a vehicle. I've wanted to do GLTC for a very long time. And the more iRacing competitive wheel-to-wheel stuff that I've been messing around with, the more I want to. So I've got a BRZ. We're going to do some testing with my buddy's FA24 swap BRZ. We're going to see how that compares as far as lap times, but it's either going to be that or I'm going to turn Boogie into a GLTC car because GCs have actually been doing fairly well, and we've got a pretty good beaten path on how to make that work.
Mm-hmm.
But that's that. And if I were to do that, turn Boogie in, I'd rather not do that because I don't want to give up on Boogeyman. And at that point, what I'd really like to do is stick Dylan, my crew chief, in the car, and we just continue on with Boogeyman, except he's driving it. And then I'll go do GLTC, and then we can go to the events at the same time, and we're not running at the same time, so we can help each other out.
That sounds like more fun.
It just sounds like a great time, and then Boogie doesn't really go away, and then we can keep working with the partners and stuff that we've built over the years to keep doing stuff with it. Because honestly, I might be slightly overspeaking this, but I look at Boogie, and a lot of people look at Boogie as like the people's champ, and because that car is really something that could be built in your garage.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people really like to see that car doing well, and I don't think want it to go away anytime soon. They like an old 90s crap box built with junk and a plywood splitter, hanging in there and beating up on modern cars. And I want to continue doing that. And there's a lot of really cool development stuff that we're doing with Boogie, and I want to continue to do with Boogie. And it's the perfect platform for that. So I don't want to make that. I might not be driving Boogie full time, but I don't see Boogie going anywhere. Cool. But I want to do GLTC is something I've really wanted to do.
Yeah, it seems like fun. I've got a car for it, and I just have to be the driver for it now. So
Let's go, man. What are we doing?
I'm with you. So that's the end of our audience questions for the last episode. But if they have more, write in. We'll have Dewey on again. We're dumb enough to do that many times.
You guys are crazy.
Yeah.
Whatever.
All right.
I'm here to party.
All right. So I talked to you a little bit about this the last time we were on, and then we talked some more in between. And the Subaru reputation, in quotes, in racing
here we go.
Is not where I would like it to be.
It's negative.
So what I wanted to do was talk to somebody who knows and say, hey, Dewey, how do we do this? How do we make the car able to be used for good street use, no issues? That's pretty easy. I mean, we've had Subarus. We did 280 something thousand miles on one and didn't even
street use isn't the problem.
Right, not the problem.
Yeah.
But when you start doing like a track day or an autocross or time trials or sprint racing or endurance racing, how do we do that? And I thought maybe we talk about we could choose like older Imprezas, WRXs, STIs,
Oh yeah.
newer
I mean, a
ones,
lot of this is going to translate
86s,
over.
whatever.
It-
So
Let's be
not
real.
knowing the answer, I don't know how to get there, but I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe we do that. And then maybe since a lot of our base is endurance racing, maybe there's a sweet spot for endurance racing. Like if you go past X horsepower or whatever in an endurance race, you're probably going to have a bad day. So
It's all an approach. It's all an approach. And we can talk about that for sure.
okay, so one of the things you mentioned last time we were on, you were saying you got to use the right oil and overfill it a little bit. Is that kind of generic?
It's for the FAs for sure.
Okay.
So there are two engine platforms with Subarus that we're going to go 2.5. Okay. There's two engine platforms for Subarus that are going to get the majority of the love and the majority of the cars, that Subarus are powered by are either by an EJ, which came out in the early 90s and was used all the way to 2021 in the STI and some variation of that. And then you have the FA, which was introduced with the BRZ and an enthusiast platform, the BRZ in 2013 and a turbo version ish of that car in 2015 for the WRX. So it really depends on what vehicle or what engine platform you're trying to use and what you're trying to use it for. But there are a few rules of thumb that you need to especially if you're taking it on track. There are a few rules of thumb that you cannot cut corners on and you can't mess around with. Rule number one is use good oil. Okay. Subaru's factory fill is a joke. They put this junk 530 in there, or if you've got an FA, they're putting 020 in it. It's trash. They're buying it by giant barrels, and everything from your Crosstrek to your WRX is using that. And it's fine for grandma to drive her back and forth to the grocery store, but it's not fine for you to take on a track day.
So what would good oil be then?
I tend to point most people at Motul. That tends to be our go-to. And if you're going to the track, because we have fairly small bearing surfaces in these vehicles, I try to tell people take the extra precaution and use 300V, which is their like race oil.
Okay.
So if you want this thing to last, fill it with 300V and probably go a little bit over on weight than you would normally think. So like an FA, a minimum of a 530, and an EJ, which the majority of the people out there are going to be running, a minimum of a 540.
Okay.
If your car's got a ton of miles on it, maybe even bump it up to a 5 or a 1550.
Okay. And then you want to fill that a little bit over. Is that right?
On the FAs, yes, you want to overfill it. The EJs, overfilling it is just going to slosh all of that oil into your heads.
Okay.
So on the EJs, you start running into other issues. Again, people really fail to understand the EJ was designed when the tire technology was not the same. Okay. They were not doing the same stuff with those cars as we are with them now. So the EJ, you need to take a couple of extra steps. If you're taking it to the track, if you're going to your first track day or whatever, throw some good oil in it, keep an eye on your temperatures. You're going to be fine. But if you do that and you're like, hey, I want to go to the track more, I'm going to start doing a little more competition, or I'm getting some really beefy tires, or I'm ripping around up in the mountains, whatever you're doing, that's going to be high G load stuff. Get a good oil pan. There's a few different brands out there. I'm not going to sit here and toot our own horn too much, but our IAG competition pan is a good example of what a good pan would be. Killer Bee's high G pan is decent also, but that's going to allow you not only some more oil capacity, but it's going to keep the oil at the pickup. And that is a very big deal with these because, again, oil likes to slosh right out of the pan and into your heads. And it's not so much of the oil being in the heads that's the problem. It's the oil is not at the pickup. So that sucks there. Then you have nice metal on metal contact with bearings, and we're all having a cry. Mm-hmm. Oil pressure drops through the floor. That's the very first precaution. The next thing, and this is another thing I can't stress enough, is let's be real. We're all going to go and we're going to modify these vehicles. We're just going to do it. Tuning is massive. I can't stress to you enough how important a good tune is. And what a good tune is probably not what you think. It's not the one that makes the most horsepower. Subarus are a pain to tune correctly. Okay. So if you're going to a tuner that's like, man, I've tuned 2,000 horsepower Lamborghinis and, this LS and all that, that's not the guy you want. You want somebody who, that's what they do is Subarus. You want a Subaru based tuner. They take a different approach, how you approach the timing maps, what type of boost you can use, yada, yada, yada. And most of those tuners, if you go, hey, I really, I'm going to be taking this to the track. I need you to go easy on it. A lot of times they'll even give you a separate track map from your street map, which should be, they'll pull a little timing and it'll be a little easier when you're hanging out at higher RPM, a little easier on the engine. But tuning is massive and you need to listen to your tuner. If your tuner says, hey, man, you need bigger injectors, get injectors. Don't play around.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the big two. The next one, and this is something that's any track car, is temperature control. So fluid temps, temperature control just in general. Not only for your coolant, but your oil. And the oil is the thing that a lot of people because they don't have a proper oil temp gauge in the car, they don't realize that the coolant and oil temperature disparity can be pretty extreme in a Subaru. You can be running around at 220 degree coolant temps and have 260 degree oil temps. Now, 260, 270 degree oil temps, that's not a problem with, I've heard of E46 M3s. That's just normal,
Mm-hmm.
That Subarus do not like anything over 250. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to play like I'm a metallurgy expert, but when you start getting, aluminum things that already have problems with tolerances hot, they start doing strange stuff. Don't take it past 250. Honestly, I tell most people get out of it at 230 if you want the engine to last. If you're in a competition scenario, you got the right oil, you got to do what you got to do. But if you need to try to get your temps to maintain, as low as you possibly can. Try to keep them. If you're like an endurance scenario, you may want to try to do whatever you can to keep it under 200 to 210. So yeah, it might take some extreme coolers and some wild ducting.
What about the I'm gonna hit you and you're not gonna like me.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
What about the head gasket?
Ah! All right. First off, Subaru's head gaskets are not an issue. The only car that had the only engine that had head gasket issues in the Subaru line was the 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine. That thing ate head gaskets. It was a mess. The second it rolled off the lot, it needed a head gasket. They're awful. They never really did fix it. They're complete shit. So if you want to complain about that, have that. Okay, that's fine. You want to complain about that car? Let's all have a cry. So we're talking your GC 2.5 RSs, your Outbacks of that generation, your base model Imprezas from like 2002 on, base model Foresters and Legacies and stuff. All of them had this engine. All of them crapped head gaskets. Okay, if it's got a 2.5 NA, walk away from it. You don't want that. Okay, but if you were to even get a 2.2 or a 1.8, they were great. They're rock solid. We actually had a lady with a 2.2 naturally aspirated. She had an Outback Sport. Okay, it was probably like a 96, 97 Outback Sport. This was forever ago. Mm-hmm. She drove in one day and she's like, my car is really, really overheating. I can't figure it out. And we're like, oh, okay, well, we'll take a look at it. And she's like, yeah, I'd been driving this thing for like 3 weeks and the temperature has just been right up to the top all the time. And it just never cools down. She'd been driving around like this for like a month. Well, literally her water pump fell apart. She drove around for a month like that. Now, when we got it, that engine had almost 200,000 miles on it. And she wasn't willing to go through to fix it. So we're like, we'll give you $500 for it. We took it and we put another 60, 70,000 miles on it. And then That engine ended up making its way into a buddy of mine's car, put another 100,000 miles on it.
Good
And then
Lord.
that he got in an accident. We pulled that engine out of it. I then put turbo WRX heads on this NA motor, boosted it, ran it for another 50K. And then something in the heads failed. This is not an exaggeration. Something in the heads failed. And then we took that bottom end and stuck it back in another person's car, and we threw them the OEM 2.2 liter single overhead cam heads back on it. And I think that car is still out there. And it's got to have 400 some thousand miles on it at this point. And it burns a little oil, but that's it. That's it. They can be so hammer reliable if you get the right ones, but the 2.5 NA just 8 head gaskets. Now, I'm not saying that there hasn't been head gasket problems with other Subaru, like a turbo Subaru. Now, not from a factory level, but if you turn it up, you may run into a head gasket problem if it wasn't modified correctly, or somebody just started cranking it up, whatever. Or what I tend to see a lot is the plastic end tank on the radiator went, and they just kept driving the thing, and they overheated it, and that caused the head gasket to fail. And then they're like, oh, Subaru head gasket, yada, yada, yada. It would have happened to anything. A Honda, an LS, I don't care what it is. If you overheat it, the head gasket, you're going to warp the heads. It's going to fail. And then there was also a rash of, back before closed decking the blocks was a big thing, and everybody was trying to make horsepower with these. People were putting sleeves in the block, like iron sleeves in the block, and Subaru engines do not play well with sleeves. So the sleeves would always drop, and that will cause a head gasket issue too. But that was due to, again, aftermarket modifications of these things. Or they would turn the thing way too high up on a 2.5 liter with an open deck and then crack the cylinder wall. Again, that's really not the head gasket's problem. That was a cylinder wall. But the head gasket thing is bullshit.
Okay.
It's total bullshit. Fight me.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, while you're warm.
Captain's log supplemental.
So, Bill, guess what?
What?
We did the Sentinel. We did the Sentinel.
We did.
How
did you like it?
You know what? We were talking about the Sentinel.
We have.
It was great. We understood watching how the Sentinel works, but we finally got it into our car, and I got to tell you, that was really awesome. I was able to see every one of my mistakes.
We have hours of them.
We have hours of my mistakes, but we have hours of good stuff too, which is awesome. It actually showed us the speed. Did it show us where we were on track?
We were streaming it
We were streaming it live.
boring billions of people across the world.
But it was pretty incredible. Plus, on it, you're able to put your insignia, your logos on your app also, and the clarity was amazing. It was really easy to put in, easier than I thought it was.
I know, you kept making a big deal out of it. I'm like, it's really not that hard. Until we focused on it, it wasn't too bad. And then we got some help. No. It was pretty easy.
It was pretty good.
You know what? I like the stream because some of the tracks we go to don't have great cell phone coverage, but it's got a USB stick backup. So I just uploaded the high quality video without the cellular interruption. So if you watched us earlier and said, wow, they got from there to there really quickly, you can watch the real video and see that no, we didn't. It's just a cell phone went out. But
yeah. So the learning curve for me, obviously, I'm slightly techno-Amish.
Slightly.
Slightly. When it comes to the wiring and stuff like that. But we get it in, and I love it. We were able to sit there right at the track and watch what we were doing in the car, and that was amazing. Which
was good, because if you have a problem with your radio, you can tell, if something is going on that you need to know about. Like a couple times we've had cars come in and we didn't know they were broken. I know it's hard to imagine one of our cars being broken, but whatever. But you can watch the video, and even with the cell phone coverage we had at that particular event, it was like a 30-second delay. So it wasn't bad. And you can compare multiple drivers because you have each of the stints are broken up. So we got to work on not only our driving, but if we wanted to, we could work on our pit stops and see exactly what we do. And there's some things that we need to talk about as a team. And it was pretty good. Like I said, it takes me, once we got the wiring hooked up for the power, I probably could go from an empty shell to a full up setup running Sentinel. I could probably do that in like 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So you could literally install it in a car before a race. It's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we got to see the driver and the front windshield. And if we want to, we can have three. We can see backwards. Or one of the guys we were going to work with at the upcoming event, he said, could you put a camera on the driver's eyes so we could see what they're looking at? I said, why, yes, I can. Haven't done it yet, but I'll figure it out. I've got time.
Well, I love it.
All right, very well. That sounds like I can buy another one then. Woo! People complain that it has an open deck.
Yep.
Is it a big deal? Do we go buy a closed deck?
It depends on the what you're trying to do. An open deck on a EJ20, you're good for mid 400s, no problem, because the cylinder walls are pretty decently thick. It's the same thing on an FA block. The FA, they made a much smaller piston, and they've got some really thick cylinder walls. So if you're talking like a BRZ or a WRX 2015 plus, they have some pretty thick cylinder walls. You got to go closed deck on that anytime soon. 450, I've seen 500 out of those. Don't even really got to worry about it. We rate our base block with just rods and pistons for 600 to the crank. So they're solid. And you don't got to worry about cylinder walls or anything like that. Now, the 2.5 liter is a different animal. Unfortunately, that engine, Subaru. That engine is a derivative off of a naturally aspirated 2.5 liter. Thankfully, they fixed the head gasket problem, but it already had really thin cylinder walls. And then because Subaru was trying to make 300 horsepower on 91 octane fuel, the easiest way to do it was give it some displacement. And that's how we got the 2.5 liter turbo engine in the STI. And then they stuck with it. The cylinder walls are really thin on that thing. After about 400 to 420 wheel, I really recommend go closed deck. If you're going to keep it under 400 wheel, you're going to be fine. Now, under 400 wheel is also depending on your approach to it. A lot of this is going to come back to approach. And that's why there's like, you can crack cylinder walls or lift the heads or whatever on a stock turbo. If you give it enough timing, and you give it enough boost, it's going to break, and that might only be 360 horsepower. If you're tuning super aggressive, things like that can happen. Now, you could also stick like a 30R on this thing, like a larger turbo, make 450 horsepower, and it'll, you could make a whole ton of horsepower and the cylinder walls will be fine. A rule of thumb tends to be that 400 to 420 wheel, because that's like a moderately upgraded turbocharger that if you were to lean on a little too hard, it would be pretty easy to crack the cylinder walls. The 2.5 liter has its quirks, but there are some advantages to it that even Subaru figured out. That giant bore, it's a 99.5 bore, and just to put that into perspective, an LS7 from GM has a 100 millimeter bore, so we're half a millimeter off of an LS7 piston. In that tiny little block, these are huge pistons. There's some advantages to, if you can get that entire combustion chamber to light off, you can make a really efficient engine, especially at high RPM. Too bad we don't have the rod ratio to use them at too high of an RPM, but you do some tricks like stick a 2 liter crank inside of it and put the right rod in it, and you can get 9,000 RPM out of it.
So what's this other rumor that I hear about silicone issues in the oil?
Oh, that's a good one. And to be perfectly honest, was it a little blown out of proportion? Maybe, but yeah, no. Okay. What's really funny is where the real problems were, people don't seem to want to talk about it. All right. Now, there was some excessive silicone. The FA engines are a little of a pain in the ass to seal. The EJs, you'll never see this problem. This is an FA problem, and it's because the FA, there's a lot of things that are put together with silicone, including that giant front cover, which it includes your oil pump. And during assembly, it looks like some folks got a little overzealous. Okay. Now, what I have heard, the rumor is something needed to be changed on a bunch of engines, and the ones that had excessive silicone were actually ones that were taken back apart and put back together. So that's the ones they were finding a lot of silicone. First off, a little bit of silicone in your pickup, it does not affect oil pressure at all. Now, giant hunks of silicone completely clogging your oil pickup, that's a problem. Where the real problem was, though, and I'm going to call out Toyota for this, the Toyota mechanics absolutely hate working on them. It's not a Toyota engine, it's a Subaru engine. They hate working on those things. And when they did that valve spring recall on the FA20s, those guys were just slapping those things together. And the amount of the Subaru mechanics, you didn't have issues. So you weren't running into problems with the BRZs anywhere near as much as you were the FT86, so the Scion or the later 86. When they switched it over to Toyota, you saw a ton of problems with those because those guys didn't want to work on them. And they were just as fast as they could glopping these things together. And there was a lot of silicone showing up in those pickups. And that was murdering a lot of engines. So it would happen a lot. They'd go in for the valve spring recall, and then a month and a half later, they'd be sitting at Six Star Motorsports in Chicago waiting for an engine because it nated, and Toyota told them to, cram it because they didn't want to work on it.
So
And it was ugly.
I'm sorry. Does this generally point to like issues with the production quality control systems?
So this recall was done for a valve spring. They had valve springs that were failing. Okay. And it was early BRZs and Scion FRSs that had this more than anything. So the fix for it really wasn't that bad. They just popped up a more quality valve spring in. But to do that, they had to remove the valve covers and get in there and do this. They could even do it with the engine in the car if you were real snazzy. And they would just glop silicone back on. So it was happening on the dealer level in the earlier cars. Now, on the later cars, the ones that they changed something before the engine got put in the car and they had to open them up, and that's where they were finding excessive amounts of silicone. That was more of a production level, but I don't know if it went maybe from an automated thing to a hand done thing, and that's where the problem was, or they were told, hey, we need to have these like 300 engines done and by Tuesday, and they were just hauling through it. But a lot of it seems more of a nobody was taking their time, or they probably weren't properly trained. Those are the extreme excessive ones, though, and I've got to be real. I think I've only heard of one, maybe two, of the silicone for the FA24s of finding excessive silicone in the pickup being attributed to an engine failure, that there was enough there that we're like, that was probably the problem. More than likely, that probably isn't what did the engine in if the engine did go, especially now that we know more about the oil pressure drops. And that is a real thing. So if there isn't a question about that, we are going to talk about that for sure, because the FA24 does have issues with, at least in the BRZ, has some pretty serious issues with oil pressure on right-hand corners.
So, what platforms would you recommend for budget racing, higher level racing, and GLTC?
Well, budget racing and higher level racing are different things. What kind of racing?
Budget racing, endurance. I would call that, yeah, endurance racing.
Okay. Depending on if the base FA20 can make the kind of horsepower you're hoping it would, a BRZ is a great option. It's pretty easy to keep temps under control. You can make about 185 to 190 wheel pretty easily on that. And if you're allowed to use ethanol, even if you're not, but if you're allowed to use ethanol, you got a good tune. That thing will run. I loan my BRZ to people. It's a 2013. It's got almost 100,000 miles on it now, and at least 40 of it has just been murderous track miles. And I give my car to people for the entire weekend to let them go to the track with it. And it just laughs at it. Other things have broke, but yeah, they're pretty solid. And honestly, one of the nice things about BRZs is one, they're really easy on brakes. They're easy on tires because they don't weigh a ton. They're pretty balanced. If you break a transmission, which they aren't, admittedly the strongest thing out there, but they're no worse than S2000, you can pick up another trans for anywhere between $300 and $500. So just take a spare trans with you to the track, especially if you're endurance racing. If you guys even remotely can wrench, you can have a clutch done you could do a clutch job on that in an hour if you know what you're doing. They're solid cars. They really, really are. Now, if you need a little more horsepower than what that's going to allow you, the FA24 is now becoming an option, but then you're talking about a new the price of that car is going to go up quite a bit. You can pick up a used BRZ for 10 grand. You're a base level newer FA24, you're looking at 25 for a used one right now. So that gets expensive fast. If you need more horsepower and we're talking about starting to mess with big boys, you're going to go fighting, I don't know, Camaros or whatever, you're going to need turbo power. So at that point, it really depends on how deep your pockets are and how crazy you're trying to get. If you're trying to do it on a budget, my recommendation would be a Bug Eye. Okay. Bug Eyes are great. 02 to 03 WRXs, you got to find one with a clean body. And it doesn't matter. It does not matter if the engine is shit because you're throwing it in the garbage anyway. Go into this immediately understanding that you're putting a different engine in it. You have a few different options on engine, and it's going to depend on what your rules allow. One thing I can really tell people, while we're kind of floating around in this, and I'm going to tangent a hair here, is I even learned this when I started getting into time attack, that building to a class is great because it really helps with scope creep. If you're just building whatever, scope creep can get out of control real fast. Everybody does not need an unlimited class time attack car. Everybody thinks they want a sequential transmission. Everybody thinks they want giant rotated turbos and all this stuff. You don't. So if you're building to like an endurance class, read the rules 3 or 4 times, see what they say, read the rules 300 or 400 more times to see what they don't, and then do all of that. But if you have like a power to weight class, you figure out how you can make the car competitive without making a ton of horsepower, and there's lots of options for that. Mm-hmm. Horsepower is heat, and heat is the enemy here. And so is this car going to be competitive against like cars that are consistently running 500-600 horsepower? Not in an endurance setting at all. Will it in a time attack setting? Absolutely. But if you're talking like a cheaper Subaru and you're running like endurance, I'd recommend trying to stick to you're going to be putting a built engine in it, but the transmission, everything else is really solid. I really, really recommend put your money into good tuning, and that may involve aftermarket engine management and heat control. Temperature management is everything.
Okay. What if you were to do a GLTC car?
I got to be real. My 2 favorite builds right now are a BRZ, like an FA24 BRZ. Now that the aftermarket has done a very good job of sorting out what Subaru screwed up. We got the oil pressure issues pretty sorted. So an FA24 BRZ would be phenomenal for GLTC. A FA20 BRZ that's going to be a mid-pack car, but you're not really going to be able to make enough horsepower with it. So you're talking about a swap for that. But that chassis is phenomenal. If you were to go all-wheel drive, a Bug Eye is going to be a little tough because it's going to be a little heavy. But you have some advantages of a Bug Eye or a GD STI being able to shove big tires in it. And the aftermarket exists to do all sorts of fun stuff. And you'd be surprised, even though the thing's large, you can actually get quite a bit of weight out of it. Most of the faster GLTC cars tend to be running around 3,000 pounds right now, 3 to 3,100. That's actually the sweet spot. And you can make a caged Bug Eye with, a turbo and everything else run with that. But my favorite build right now is actually doing it with a GC. Those guys, Adam Wood and Mike McGinnis, both have 2 separate philosophies with builds, and both both are doing really well in their own right. I got to drive Adam Wood's car at Laguna, and me and Tom O'Gorman both went out and drove it, and we ran almost identical times, mostly because I just understand that platform really well. It was amazing how fast he picked up speed with that. But both of us would have qualified third in the GLTC field with it. The car is highly capable, and he's got a turbo 2.5 liter, just making a boatload of torque. Stock STI turbo, I want to say, with a 6-speed. So it's got your 3 differentials, the DCCD and Brevos and all the goodies. And but the weight's down quite a ways. He's actually working the other direction now and trying to add some weight in so we can add a little more power. And then you have Mike McGinnis's approach. And this is actually a really fun one. Mike McGinnis's approach was to take a EZ36, so an H6 out of a older Outback. You can pick these engines up for $1,700-$1,800 in the junkyard, no problem. Bolts right up to an STI trans. The engine mounts are right where they need to be, so it'll go right to the same spot. And he can make 260-ish horsepower if he needs to, but he's got it dialed back to like 230. And he's got an oil pan he's going to be releasing soon, but he built basically a custom oil pan that took care of any oil slosh issues, which are kind of the same thing. That engine's very closely related to the FA engine and some of those oil slosh issues that they were seeing in the FA24 already existed in the EZ36. And yeah, you got 3.6 liters of displacement. It works really good with that trans. And the engine's a little bit heavier, but after you dress out a turbo Subaru engine, it's pretty much the same. And since you're not dealing with turbo power, you can keep temps really in control. And obviously you got that natural aspirated throttle response, which is nice. And he was doing some damage with that.
Yeah.
Now, with that stated, he ended up 8th overall at COTA. And he said he was probably down 15 horsepower of what he could have been running, which is that's moving, because that's a very power oriented track, and that the entire GLTC field is full of drivers. But Mike is one hell of a driver, and I'd be really interested. This is not taking anything away from Adam, but even Adam would admit that Mike's probably a better driver. I want to see him at like Gingerman and maybe get Tomo in both of those cars and see like where they actually stack up. That works, and those chassis are actually fairly cheap to pick up. You can pick up what you want to do is get a base model Impreza. Is the way to do this. So you go find like an Impreza Brighton or Impreza L or something like that, real base model, and you can pick them up for like $2,000 still. Do not go get an RS. You're going to pay way out the ass for that, for a really heavy hood you're just going to throw away, and a stupid front bumper you're going to hate anyway.
Wow.
And then a sunroof and a bunch of sound deadening and all the crap you don't want for a race car. So go get an L, like Boogie's based on an Impreza L. So you go get grandma's old L that's got 300,000 miles on it, and you stick a cage in it, and you've got the basis of what you need there. And start with that. And then you can, it's easier to add weight in than find weight to take out.
Mm-hmm.
So just to circle back a little bit, do we miss anything for issues to address like that, the oil slosh stuff in the trends?
Well, so the 22 plus, sorry, the 21 plus, either way, the new GR86 and BRZ with the FA24s. The FA24 did have some, and it's been well documented. There's a guy on, I think his name's 900 BRZ or something on YouTube, did some extraordinarily in-depth testing on this. But basically what we found out is on track, there's some massive oil pressure dips in right-hand corners. Now, the original concept is we're just going to stick an oil baffle in it, and it's going to stop oil from sloshing out. And unfortunately, that didn't work out quite as well as we had hoped. We weren't exactly sure what was causing it. And I say we as in the entire Subaru community. Almost every major company was trying to make something. We even threw our hat into the ring a little bit, and we're not 100% sure where we sit on that right now. But what we ended up finding was the temporary fix. And this is why I tell people, if you run a little bit thicker oil, so in the BRZ, if you're taking it to the track, run a 540 and then overfill it by 1 quart. Okay, if you've got an FA24 BRZ or GR86, 5W40 Motul, preferably 300V, and overfill it by 1 quart. And there's no downside to overfilling it by 1 quart. You don't have any oil slosh issues into your head or anything like that. You're just overfilled by 1 quart. Overfill by 1 quart. And that'll take care, or at least band-aid, the majority of the pressure drops. But there is still a lot of circumstances where it's lower than we'd like to see. What they managed to do is another company. So the problem is, you're looking at when you're developing something like this, you're looking at it at this black box, trying to determine what's actually happening. And the theory was, under right-hand corners, that oil was sloshing away. Well, what we're coming to find out is it was more of a oil not returning fast enough situation, and the adding volume seemed to help. So what they did is just made a really large oil pan for it. And that seems to be helping a lot. Now, this isn't in production yet, and other people are testing it, and there's still a lot, but this seems to be kind of the silver bullet. And we were trying to find out what TRD and Gaizu Racing with Toyota were doing with the GR Cup cars, and it sounds like it was something similar. So they have an aftermarket oil pan too, with a little more capacity, and the little more capacity helped out quite a bit. So again, there is the aftermarket fixes everything, especially with Subarus. I don't know why we have to fix everything for Subaru, but we do. But that's some of the fun, quote unquote, of being an enthusiast and being married to this goofy brand, is you're going to be involved in fixing a lot of things that maybe you shouldn't have to fix, like oil slush issues on a car, oil pressure issues on a car that was supposed to be ready for the track straight from the factory.
What about any other issues with like suspension, any other areas?
I mean,
is that the biggest?
Depending on, Subarus as chassis wise are honestly really good. You're going to hear, well, it's all-wheel drive, it's going to understeer or whatever, but there's aftermarket solutions for everything, and a lot of that is, if you don't know what you're doing, find somebody who does. The community's really open. But you can make these cars handle just about any way you want. And the nice thing about Subarus is, instead of them using technology to hide a bunch of their shortcomings, like Mitsubishi kind of did, where they took a really base model car and then threw like really cool active differentials and all sorts of stuff to make the car dance. Subaru, there's not much different from a base model Impreza all the way to an STI. They were designed really well from the ground up. The chassis are really good, especially bug eyes and on. They're extremely stiff. You don't have this sideways engine problem that, a lot of these inline fours trying to be all-wheel drive have. We may have engine problems. We don't have transmission problems when you start talking about the STI 6-speed. The trans is rock solid, and we've got a really good front differential, an awesome center differential, and a decent rear differential. We're not blowing out rear diffs. We're not blowing out front diffs. We're not blowing out transfer cases. That stuff doesn't happen to us. So honestly, from a suspension, everything else standpoint, yeah, if you got an older one like a bug eye, you got 4 struts, and no, it's not double wishbone, and you're going to have to you might get a little more tire wear, and the approach you have to take with certain things might be a little different than, say, like a Porsche or something like that. But pretty much anything can be done. BMW's been making struts work for how long now? So has Porsche. Porsche's been doing great with struts. Look at the Cayman. So you can do amazing things with struts. And I will say that their multi-link rear suspension maybe has a little bit to be desired. It was made more for making more trunk space than it was for performance, but it can still be made to work, at least on track. Subaru decided, at least Subaru Rally Team USA decided, that it wasn't worth the effort and just threw struts in the back of their new rally cars. But it can be made to work. There's advantages to struts too.
Well, so if you have time, why don't we have a little bit of fun?
Oh God,
I'm gonna have a
this
little bit of
wasn't
good time.
fun.
No, I mean this is a
lighter.
little
Whatever.
extra. This is
I see what you're
extra.
saying. I see what you're saying. Okay.
So we are going to bring you into the Fast and Furious storytime questions. We can get to know
Yes,
just a little bit.
I love the Fast and Furious.
Okay, have
It
we
has
done
nothing
this
to do with the
before?
movie.
No.
Okay, excellent. He's so into it. All right, so when we started off, then, Bill, do you want to start it off?
Sure. All right, Dewey. What is your race car number and why? And do your cars have names? Obviously, we know one of them has names.
Does it?
Yeah.
You're like one of those guys.
Well, first off, my racing number is 70 most of the time. And the reason it's 70 is because I wanted it to be 7 and somebody had taken it. So I just went with 70 because it was open, and I'm just, that's what it is. So it's 70 now. So my racing number is 70 because I wanted 7. That story sucks. Now, as far as cars having names, there's a rule for this. And the rule is you can't just give a car a name. Okay. It must either earn the name or somebody else has to give the name. You aren't allowed to name your own car. Okay. Like I didn't name my BRZ, but my BRZ's name is Dolly. Why? Because it's got a Dolly Parton plate. Somebody else just started calling it Dolly, but it does have a Dolly Parton plate. So that's Dolly. Boogeyman, I didn't name Boogeyman. The whole thing came from, I was in a Facebook chat telling the street mod guys that I'm bringing this car that's going to break this class and you guys better be ready for it. And then like things were getting in the way and like life and whatever. And they kept going. They started referring to it as the street mod Boogeyman, as in this thing that doesn't exist. So like, that's where the name actually came from, is, oh, this street mod Boogeyman, we should all be scared of this thing, and then one day it showed up and I just leaned right into the name. You guys called it Boogeyman. Boogeyman's here. There you go. And then my old O2WRX, we referred to as the Rooster, and I didn't name that.
The Rooster.
It got named the Rooster from the old Alice in Chains song of the Rooster, because it wasn't going to die. It went 282,000 miles of hellish abuse. It ran its fastest quarter mile time with 250K on the engine. It went through 4 transmissions. It almost set the stock turbo WRX record with 250K on the clock. It like, that car just wouldn't die. So they called it the Rooster because it wouldn't die, and it got named the Rooster. These cars are, and then my 05 STI is called the Possum because every time they thought it was dead, it would still show up at the next event and screw everything up. So it would play dead. So they started calling it the Possum. I don't name these cars. You can't name your own car, and it might not be a name you like, but it's what the car's name's going to be.
The Rooster. That's a good one, actually.
Awesome.
I
Favorite
miss the
podcast?
Rooster. She was a good unit.
Yeah. Yep. Favorite podcast?
Not ours.
Man.
Not ours, not yours.
Yeah, well, I really like Tom and DJ's, just their approach.
It's really
to
good.
that. It's really good, and I'm having a hard time not saying that, but man, some of the best times I've had listening to a podcast has been Dinner with Racers. Their level 5 special, when they were talking about the D spec racer or whatever. Oh, it was so good. It was like, that is my favorite piece of podcast ever. And it's just for the insanity of it when they're talking about when they built this D Sports racer for some random SCCA class to win the runoffs, and put like, they made IMSA money look stupid with the amount of money they spent to do this, because they really didn't have rules, and they had all the money in the world and just went all in on it. If you haven't listened to that, I can't stress enough. Go listen to that. It was amazing.
I have.
And is it not phenomenal? Did you not just laugh hysterically the whole time listening to it?
It is. It is.
So, what was your first car, and what was the worst car you ever had?
My first car, which was a 1986 Mercury Topaz, which we called Blue Thunder.
Oof.
because it had no exhaust and was really loud,
Ah,
and it was blue and it was awful. And I pinched off. I had no money, so when the brake lines started rusting through, we would just pinch them off. So by the time it finally like went to the junkyard, it had one working brake. I do not recommend that. That was terrible, stupid high school things, and I knew no better. But that was my first car, and then I had to buy the family Chevy Lumina minivan after that car met its demise. And so I was the kid in high school with a minivan.
Nice.
That that could have been worse. And that was actually a decent vehicle to me. I can't really complain.
All
Kind
right.
of kept me out of trouble too. I put it on two wheels a couple times, and that kind of brought me down to earth.
I could
So-
see that. The one brake thing kind of makes you go sideways.
Mm.
All right, sir. I don't mean to tax you this late into the podcast, but I need to know, in Dewey's mind, what is the coolest car ever?
The Ford RS 200.
Okay. That was quick.
It wasn't even a question. That car was
ah,
pure lunacy straight from the factory. Everything about that was insane. Like let's make the lightest all-wheel drive med engine made out of spit and tissue. I came and then they made 500 of them just to get it out. Like the car is nuts. It's by far it's my favorite car of all time.
Awesome.
Most memorable car breakdown on road or track?
Oof. Well, the old flame from this last season's definitely high up in there.
Laguna.
Yeah, Laguna burn down. That was a pretty good one. Another one I had, we were going to buy a vehicle for a buddy of mine in New Jersey. I lived in Michigan at this time. We decided to drive to New Jersey to go get this Impreza wagon. And I had my WRX at the time. And on the way back, we're like, we're gonna go hit some cool roads. So we're like looking on, this is before Google Maps, by the way. So we're looking on I had Microsoft, whatever their program was, and I was trying to use that. And there was these fun looking roads that were way up in the mountains. We're like, let's go hit these. So we're on our way back and we decide to go hit these. And the road goes from being paved to being dirt to being kind of like a 2-track and then kind of really not a road at all. And somewhere along the way, I hit a pretty large rock on my downpipe, and it pushed the turbo up, and it cracked my oil
Ooh.
feed line to my turbo. We're way up on top of this mountain, and I'm just spewing oil out of this thing. We end up having to sleep on this mountain for 2 days until a dealership opened. And then we went in there to go buy it, and they didn't have the part I needed, obviously, because why would they have anything I need in stock? We're in the middle of nowhere, and we found a Subaru dealership like 50 miles away. So we had this old guy. Man, this dude was he had to have been like 70. He basically brazed the crack shut. And I drove that thing for years like that until it finally failed again. But yeah, that was probably one of my more memorable breakdowns, just because me and my buddy still talk about that. We were stuck on this mountain for a couple of days.
Oh,
We went and bought
wow.
tents and stuff, and it was fun.
Oh, that's worthy.
Yep.
Yeah. So, what was the car that got away?
Oh, my 93 Volkswagen Corrado. I sold it for way too cheap. I love that car. It was my third Corrado I owned, but my first VR6, and it sounded great. It was comfortable. It's hard for me to find cars that fit me correctly because I'm 6'4" and all torso, so I'm shaped like a salamander. So things just don't fit me correctly. I look like the Geico lizard. But either way, this car fit great. It was a ton of fun to drive. The problem was I was just dirt poor, and I kept breaking the transmission in this thing because most of it was me doing dumb things, but I couldn't afford to fix it. So I let it go really cheap, and I really shouldn't have. And that car, I could probably get 20 grand for that right now. And I let it go for like $2,500. And it was just an awesome car. I still have such a soft spot for Corrados. They're so much fun.
All right. I would ask one question that is a favorite of Vicky's sister, but I'd rather, if I'm going to go in the bathtub, I'm going in all the way. So we're going to win the lottery, and we're going to buy a desert island. And on our island, there's going to be a racetrack, and we're going to have an asphalt track, and we're going to have a dirt track.
Okay.
And as a thank you for coming on, we want to make sure we have the proper cars for when you visit. So we want to know, what 5 cars do you need for us to have there waiting for you?
Oh man. 5. What is with it? What is this podcast in 5?
I know.
Why can't it be 3?
You know,
It could be 3 and you just get 2 of them. That's fine.
Oh man. So we got a
One guy
dirt track.
takes five Spec Miatas, so you can make this easy.
Well, I don't know. An FA24 BRZ with some decent suspension would be great, because you need a slow car.
Mhm.
Okay. And then we need a Ford RS200 with a few different sets of tires and some mild modifications. We're talking like mid 400s, so that'd be kind of the rallycross car. I'm hoping we have a few jumps, so we're gonna need some form of like trophy truck style thing. I've been having so much fun driving those things in iRacing that I need to experience that in real life, and if I can have this, and then we've got to get something just Looney Tunes out of this situation. So I'd probably say a Carrera GT.
Okay.
Manual.
Yep.
I don't even care what color it is. That thing just wails the right amount of beautiful sounds, and it's manual and mid-engine and just perfect. And
we'll even have you with new tires, so you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. None of this original tire crap that takes out actors. And then I got one more, don't I?
Yep.
Oh man.
What about the coolest car ever? I could make this easy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I already said Ford RS200.
Oh, sorry.
That's my rallycross car.
Oh, I thought you went full rally.
No. I have to have one that I can do both. So that's going to be my go slide around on the track car.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be, I'm going to be jealous of somebody else's car, and I'm going to want that. That's what's going to happen.
You can have a wild card car, because, Jennifer will be bringing the taco truck. So that's taken care of. So you're good.
Nice.
There you go.
You need a taco truck.
See, I would say like the RV would be one, but I need to be able to. I figured if we're all going to be on this island, I'm just going to be able to like build a nice little garage to have all my cars in. I'll just live in that, so I don't need the RV.
We'll take care of you. It'll be nice.
What about pre-race rituals? What do you do?
Vomit. That's a big one for me. I'm a big vomiter.
We talked about this before, didn't we?
I knew that one.
Yep, we went over this before, but yeah, vomiting's a big one. And if I don't vomit, usually bad things happen to the car.
You make a point of vomiting. You purge.
I don't. It just happens. If I'm really nervous about it, I tend to vomit, and then good things happen. If I'm like really chill about something, karma just smacks me. Other than that, I like to try to get, and this is something I started doing a lot more last year, is try to get to the grid as early as possible so I can kind of sit in the car and honestly just kind of sit in silence a little bit, almost take like a mini nap, try to get my brain to chill out a little bit. Other than that, once we get moving, like nerves and everything really just go away. But man, nerves leading up to it, it's always been, I don't know if I overthink it. It's just anxiety. It is what it is.
So, this is something that's always interested me. As far as your driving and racing, what are some of the things that you are relatively good at on track? What is your specialty?
What some people will tell you my specialty is, it's I feel like it's changed because it's stuff that I've focused on. One thing I can tell you is I'm really good at driving bad cars.
Okay.
And I've proven this with this competition I had called we called it the Just the Tip Cup, but what it was a giant exhaust tip as a trophy. But the whole concept of this was we'd get 5 different drivers. Most of the time they were time attack and GLTC drivers, and we'd all drive some random car. And we would try to get the crappiest car we could, and we'd each get a couple of laps in it. And we would take your best time. I think it was 3 hot laps is what we would get. We'd hide the timer somewhere in the car so you couldn't see it. And then we'd reveal all the times in the end. And I went for years winning that against all sorts of different competition. Really, really good drivers, but a lot of these cars were terrible. I mean, terrible. We drove this one Mini Cooper S that the guy just disconnected the front sway bar totally. And it had terminal oversteer. It was terrifying to drive. But if, with a front wheel drive car, if you know how to balance on the front tires and just stay in it, you can get it to rotate and do the things you want to do. It was fine for me, but everybody else was losing their minds. And we drove some Honda Fits that were complete junk. We drove, just all sorts of random crap. And I'm good with bad cars. And that actually works to my advantage with this new format that we're using for time attack, because if we're trying to turn a really fast lap time, you have to do it within this particular session. That's how it works. And like for GridLife Midwest, it was scorching hot. We're talking like mid 90s. The drifters had destroyed the track. The track was awful. Nobody was going to run a record time at that point. But I like when the track is terrible, and my car is terrible, I feel like that just seems normal to me. So I ended up winning by a pretty good margin due to me being used to it being junk, even though my car was performing really great up until that point. When it, got to that point of the day, it just felt like last year's car. It was understeering when it wasn't supposed to, and like it had no grip, and the car was getting hot. No, I'm like, well, this is Tuesday to me. Everybody else is losing their mind. I'm just like, well, this is what I've been dealing with for the past few years. So I don't know what your problem is. And yeah, so I'm really good at driving bad cars. That, and I've really, really focused on the strengths of the type of car I drive, which tends to be a Subaru and tends to be an all-wheel drive Subaru, on corner exit. Corner exit is something I've gotten better and better at, and it shows up in my trap speeds at the end of the straights.
So what do you think are some of the things you need to focus on or work on?
Braking.
Oh.
Braking and speed maintenance, or minimum speed. That really, really showed when we started comparing data with a bunch of people last year at Lime Rock on the last corner. I was like 5 to 6 miles an hour slower than a lot of the Club TR guys.
Wow.
And I shouldn't have been. I should have been fairly similar. If I would have been within 2 mile an hour, I would have been like, okay, but I was like anywhere between 5 to 8 miles an hour slower and into that corner in different areas. And obviously I had the acceleration to make up for it, and I still ended up winning that event. But you look at some of these Club TR guys, they don't have the power to lean on, so they've got to find their time in other places. That was one of the things that really threw me into getting my BRZ, because I started relying way too much on power and not driving a car correctly. Power is only going to get you from one corner to the other fast. It's not going to get you through the corner, and it can cause as many or more problems than it solves. So that's been a big thing. Is I try not to be a point and shoot driver, and some of that comes from me really focusing on corner exit, but I need to work on minimum speed.
Well, this comes to the good news, bad news thing.
Uh-oh.
The good news is we're done. The bad news is I've got 30 more and counting Fast and Furious Storytime questions for you. And I've also thought of the next podcast episode you'll be on. So.
Oh, really? All right.
Right.
Hey, I'm down. You guys are fun. You guys are a good time. I would love to be a part of that. And if you start doing some more with that BRZ, maybe I'll drag you on to our podcast, and we can do some Thursday thing stuff.
That would be quite fun.
Yep.
Audra.
Oh, we're doing more?
No, right here. Down the bottom.
Oh, sorry.
Keep scrolling.
Well, now you have to edit.
I always have to edit.
It's fine.
My bad, man. My bad.
Don't do it live like Dewey. Sorry.
That's all. I don't edit anything.
Oh,
Having listened to every single episode, I know.
I do not edit a single thing. I've left to go use the bathroom a few times, like all sorts of stuff. I don't care. I don't edit anything. I've had people ring my front doorbell and I had to run up there. I just let it roll.
Mm-hmm.
You're a part of it. That's why I try to get a co-host who can talk for a little bit.
Vamp for me, son. Vamp for me.
Yep.
Yep.
So, how do we keep in contact and or follow up with you and your team?
I'm pretty easy to find. If you go to Facebook and type in Eric and then Dewey, Dewey, I guarantee I'm the first person who comes up. So I got to be real. I'm super active on Facebook. I know it seems elder state millennial that way, but that is just how I roll. I also have a Gen Z account. I mean Instagram. That is Dewey WRX, and I try to post there as much as I can, but I'm terrible at it. Because I like to talk. Pictures are just strange. You can see a bunch of my new stuff on the IAG Performance YouTube channel. And if you want to see some of my old stuff and some of the development of Boogeyman and even some of my old time attack shenanigans with my STI, I still have them all up on the Go Faster Suck YouTube channel. And which I think I'm going to start doing something with that brand, but I haven't figured out what I'm going to do with because I now have full ownership of it again. Yeah. Or you can just call me at IAG. If you've got Subaru questions, I man the phones all day long. So just call up to IAG, ask for Dewey, and you'll get straight to me. I'm an easy guy to find.
Awesome.
Well, you've survived another episode, sir.
Oh,
Yes, you
man.
have.
No, you guys survived me. Get it right.
Well, we know we're going to Lime Rock, so we'll see you there, I assume. And,
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully we will bump into you at another track in the future.
I hope so. Are you guys going to do pit race?
We are. I'm contemplating. We love Pit Race as a site and GridLife as a whole. It's just I don't want to race there if it's finals. Like I think it's the national finals and interfere with the championships.
You aren't going to interfere with anything, especially if it's time attack. It's split up just fine. And if you're going to play around in GLTC, by that time it's going to be figured out. You guys are fine. Just go. Okay, I got to be real. I think that event's going to be a complete riot. That track's a ton of fun.
It is.
Just being if you're there for GLTC, I think the racing is going to be fantastic. Time attack's going to be really wild. We're going to set some absolutely nutcase times there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a really fun event. And of all the stuff that was on the calendar this year, that was the one that got me amped up, which is kind of funny because everybody thought I'd get amped up about Road America, but Road America is just so hard on cars that I have a really hard time getting excited about that.
Yeah, and when it's hard on cars, it doesn't leave much left when it's done. So
yeah, that I don't. And again, I'm not trying. It's hard on any sort of big power 4-cylinder car because like boogie hits, it seriously is going to hit 175 there 3 times probably in one lap. It's just so hard on an engine, and especially a turbocharged engine that I don't want to have to worry about building another engine after it. Everybody's like, you can go slower. No, you can't.
I could, but then I wouldn't be me.
Why would I even be here? Like, what's the point? So I'd rather go put the effort into pit race, which I'm going to run. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see you
awesome.
pulling out of the bottom of the pit in 5 and 6. That's going to be fun to watch.
It was a good time when I was there for that flat 4 throwdown thing. I ran a 149.8 there and had a ton on the table.
I was going to say that's really fast, but I would have expected you to be faster.
Yeah, I had a lot of I was overheating. Like there was a ton of stuff wrong with it, so it was like I limped it to a 49.8. And I bet you I'd go 6+ seconds faster.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking it was going to be like, a little bit longer than Gingerman time-wise, but it's a lot longer distance-wise. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I can't wait. And now I just got to talk my beautiful bride into letting me go to pit race for the 4th time this season. So.
Let's go.
It's going to be a busy year.
Come hang out. We could do a live podcast there. That would be fun.
There we go.
I have a 17-year-old. So
they have go-karts.
I know, but no, that's the thing. It's like she's getting ready to head off to college.
No. You're looking about this all wrong. You need to bring the 17-year-old.
Well, no, the thing is like, yeah, she's like, I'm over it.
Yeah, but this is GridLife.
This is GridLife. This is different.
Not NASA.
Totally different demographic. Okay.
This is not NASA. This is GridLife.
Yes.
Yeah. She'd have a real good time out at GridLife. She may actually need a boy.
Yeah.
That's not helping me get her there, Dewey.
So is that Do you think they'll set up GridLife at Pit like they do GridLife in the?
I don't think it's going to be a festival, but that doesn't mean it isn't going to be a party. Okay.
Yeah.
My favorite event still going is Mid Ohio. Last year's Mid Ohio, even though it was a festival, didn't have the same vibe as like the year before. The best hangs you have in the pits have always been Mid Ohio. And I have a feeling Pit Race is going to have that same vibe.
Yeah, it's
the late night
really
hanging out
not
with
that
people.
far.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Everybody's going to be, everybody's going to be chilling out. I think it's going to be really good. I can't stress enough. You guys will have a great time. That's where you really get the vibe of GridLife.
What is the date on that?
It's already on our schedule.
I know, but what is the date
I
on
think
that?
it's September.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's it's something like that. It's late season.
Pull it up. It's the final one. It's the one in purple on our schedule. Pulling it up now.
Yep.
This is great podcasting.
I know.
It sounds like my podcasting.
It is October 11th to 13th.
See? It's gonna be great.
That's
Unless
right.
it's raining. Then
I'll
it's
give it to you as an
suck.
anniversary present. There we go.
Well,
There
you
you
know,
go.
it's not. It is certainly not Halloween weekend, which is what our other race normally is, which we don't go for.
No. It'll be fun. It'll be fine. We'll be there, Dewey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured you would. So you guys need to slide by, hang out, have a good time. Even if you're just hanging, it'll be so good. Well, I'm telling you, live podcasts. It's what's
We can
up.
It's not that far.
We could dual podcast.
Could do a home and home.
That would be sick. We both run a podcast at the same time and record each other. That would be awesome. Maybe we can get Tom. We could do we could get Tom and we could get Abe and Adam and we could get
Scott.
We could have like 6 podcasts. We could get the track walking guys together.
That's right.
We could get everybody in one spot and do a giant podcast-a-palooza.
We could ruin everybody's week because every episode would be the same.
It'd be the same episode. It'd be great.
And you know what? Slip Angle would still get the most.
Well, they've been doing it the longest.
Yeah, that's true. All right, sir.
Let's
Always
see if
fun.
we get Ross Bentley there. He'll ruin the whole thing.
Ross is awesome.
Yep, he's great. All right.
Thank you, Dewey.
All right.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Dewey.
Anytime.